decided, or the state has not decided whether they're going to appeal it. So this is kind of back to the question I was asking earlier. Right now, approximately $220 million is paid throughout the state by the different municipalities. However, most likely what would change, though, is the impact aid for those areas. They currently get some of that that's sent to them because of the portions that they pay. I would anticipate, and it's just my guess, that the state would keep a larger amount of that impact aid. But you're still talking a pretty substantial amount of money that can be done in two ways. One, the state can pinch it and the rest of the money if they so choose, or they could say we're not going to put all the money into the formula. They can take that $220 million or whatever the difference is out of the formula, and then it would get, that division would get dispersed amongst all the districts, not just, they couldn't just do it to the municipalities. I'm sure we'll have some kind of information back from what the department would like to have happen. Personally, I had a bill that went this way. I think the courts made the right decision. That's just my whole portion of it. And the reason is for mine is that the Constitution basically says that when you become a municipality, you should not kind of get a negative hit for it. And that's exactly what happens right now, where you now have to tax your people more than other parts of the state to make up what the state would have put in if you had not been a municipality. So the state can decide to appeal it, but they would also have to get a stay of order. If they just appeal it, we would still have to deal with this deficit this next year. And I'm sure there'll be more comments on that. So that's pretty much everything on the ones. And if people want copies of it, they can email one of us in the public, and we will be more than happy to send you both cases. Oh, and they're on basis too, and we'll help direct you there as well. Any questions? You are a good group.
Oh, that was easy, quick. We did intend to take public testimony at 5, but since we're at 5:15.
Do we still have Deed online?
Les, are you still with us? Come on, we know you're there.
Hello? Oh.
Yes, is Les Morse with us? We're getting the signal that he's done. So.
Okay, I had a question for him, but that's okay. If
We'll
get to him.
Great. Barbara, are you online?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Since you're online, would you introduce yourself and who you may be with for the record, and we'll be glad to take your public testimony.
All right. Thank you very much. My name is Barbara Haney. I live in North Pole, Alaska.
And Barbara, you got to get a little closer to whatever you are. We can't quite hear you.
Okay. I was actually trying to get away from the
Shout at us.
Better?
Better.
It's better.
Okay. So my name is Barbara Haney. I live in North Pole, Alaska. I have comments on the literacy testing. I have a couple of other comments after that on some of the other discussion that has taken place. My opposition, I suppose, to the literacy testing is not against broad-based literacy testing like the kindergarten roundup, but I object to the new shift in literacy testing that is being imposed, and I have 3 reasons for that. First, I think it's expensive, and I'm not particularly impressed with the contractor that the state has selected, but be that as it may, it's not reliable testing. No testing, prior standardized testing before age 8 is particularly reliable when it comes to literacy. You have differences in eye and ear development, and those scores are not going to be very good predictors of future academic progress. Last, this is something that's being done because Mike Hanley, back in the 2011 Board of Education, wanted to apply to the Early Childhood Challenge Common Core Grant. And that's in the Board of Education minutes. I don't see where that's something that would be particularly useful or within the cultural confines of the state, at least certainly not in the North. I think it's a waste of money, and I think if parents really want to know how their children are reading, they can go to any literacy center or a public library and read with their children. And I think that should be really the activity that is encouraged here. If we were going to do anything to increase literacy, I'd say the one thing that used to really get my kids reading back in the day was that Pizza Hut program, which I know is not in place, but something like that, where they have a competition where they read and get some kind of kids, they need a short-term prize. They need instant gratification. Right now, there's nothing in what's going on that's going to particularly motivate a child to do well. I also want to turn my next comments to the discussion on the AAI test. And I guess I'm still kind of bothered about this discussion with cut scores because I know I have to talk to at least two of you about that. SBAC has already sent the percentages. Those percentages are going to get applied to our scores, and that's how the cut scores are going to be determined. That is, I don't think, something that anybody really is going to be determining. I think that has pretty much gone outside of the state's control. Park is using the same percentages as Thunder Balance, and I imagine AAI will also follow suit in the full name of comparability. But the other thing I want to point out is when you look at AAI's contract, we are using adaptive testing. And again, adaptive testing does not give you the student-to-student comparability that you are thinking of static sixth form tests. That's gone. You're not going to have that with any of this kind of testing. These tests are designed to compare classrooms or to compare schools, but they're not designed to compare student A and student B. And you're not going to be able to look at student A's test score and know with any degree of certainty where they're at necessarily, because these scores are being designed on a much different basis from what these sixth form tests we've used in the past are. So I think if you're going to try to use these tests for that kind of comparability, you're going to be sadly disappointed because that's not what these tests are designed for. And if you want any verification of that, I want to refer you to Joshua Cohen, the Vice President of the American Institute for Research. His remarks have really covered that. Let me go on to two last items. I heard Les Morris talk about raising expectations through these new standards. I think it's very nice to raise expectations, but you have to have a base from which those expectations are raised. And when I spent the past 2 nights looking through the scores and some of the data that was in the SIG school improvement grants, I realized that what's going on in the areas of mathematics and reading is that these students are not getting the bare basics. That is pretty obvious. You can raise expectations all you want, but if you don't have the basics being taught, it's like looking at me, I'm 5 foot tall. You can raise the expectation that I could jump a 6'5" bar, but the reality is I will never have the high jump capabilities of somebody who's maybe of the height of Senator Dunleavy. I'm a short person. You can raise the expectation, but the height isn't there. And that's ultimately, in some respects, what we're doing when we raise expectations on students who don't have the foundation. Unless we go back to retooling these standards to give students that expectations and a development that is cognitively appropriate, it's not going to happen. You're just going to be doing more of the same thing. One other last comment I want to make is I listened to Andrew Halcrow talk about diverse populations. And, when I heard him talk about that really hurt my heart. Representative Wilson knows me and knows my family. And my kids are very bright. 2 of them were graduated at the top of their class. Philip was at the top of Lathrop's class, and Victoria was at the top of North Pole's class at the secondary academy. They are both children of color, if you want to use the socioeconomic terminology, that they were not exactly the upper crust of the upper crust, and they both graduated at the very top. Both, by the way, had early literacy scores that suggested that they were always going to be special needs. And that was when I took them out of public school. But to listen to somebody talk about diverse populations as being a cause of lower test scores, to me, that is a position of ignorance that I find quite troubling. And I think while income is certainly an important component in education